call the meeting to order. All right. So has everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda? Is there any adjustments we need to make? Hearing none, we'll deem it approved. Comments from the chair. I heard from Mike that the Housing Task Force canceled their meeting due to weather. So we're going to continue talking about, I guess, the master plan or the city plan, the plan for the city plan, a little bit today, but we'll need to wait and meet with them in the future. So hopefully we can have a fairly short meeting tonight. So that's all my comments.
That's what struck me. The meeting could be fairly brief.
The only thing I want to add is the Energy Committee met.
Just give us a quick update on that.
Yeah, and they have a very strong opinion about our process for the master plan.
Okay, great.
So,
well,
who
let's
does, Barbara?
Energy Committee.
Oh.
let's put
How
that
many
under
members?
item
Me,
5 then,
Okay.
as a subpart.
I wasn't sure if it was.
Nope, sounds good. Thank you for that. Okay. All right, so that's item 3. Item 4 is general business, anything from the public that's not on this agenda. There's no members of the public present, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the city plan update discussion. So first, why don't we have Mike give us a quick update from his end, and then Barb, if you want to jump in and explain about the Energy Committee feedback, that would be great.
All right, so as I mentioned in the agenda, the Housing Task Force was canceled, but I did take some time to talk to Seth, who is the computer person here for City Hall, and talk to him about what we had been discussing, and he pretty much came out, of course I have no idea what I'm talking about, but he came out and was like, oh, well, we just need to do a Google Drive, set one of these things up, and he would sit down and meet with us to kind of set up an access type database that we could go and start to fill in kind of in the same way that you were talking about. So it sounds like he's on the same page as certainly with John, knowing kind of what framework we're looking for, or an idea that we can start to.
And who is this fellow again?
Seth is our computer, our IT person. He runs the website and all of the computer programs.
He's a city.
He's a city
for the
employee.
whole city.
Yep.
Whose office does he work out of?
Works out of the finance department, actually.
Oh, okay.
Because basically they were hired for the security, to secure all the data.
Oh,
So
oh, good. Yeah.
that's why they work for finance.
We like security.
So, but he thought this wouldn't be difficult to do, and a lot of the questions he asked were things that were talked about. It was going to be open to everybody in the public to be able to make changes, or do we restrict the access? He would recommend restricting the access to whatever group is working on it. So if we're doing housing, the housing group would have access to it. When it comes to the planning commission would have access to it. But he has other platforms that he could use to take public comment on. So it sounds like he knows some of the answers to some of the things that we're talking about. So I think it'll be good at some point coming up in the at a future meeting, probably in the near future. We'll try to have Seth come in and sit down so you guys can talk on the same wavelength, especially John.
I think we'd be ready to have him whenever it's convenient for him. So if
Okay.
you want to just
Yeah, I'll see
check
what
in
his
with
schedule
him,
is.
that would be great. Because the sooner we can get him in,
At least
the
to get a
discussion.
shell together, because we'll probably adjust that shell as we move forward.
Yeah.
So that was that was the one piece I wanted to get
Yeah.
to take a chance to talk to him about. The other piece I'll mention in this window is May 9th is, I think, Jamie may have emailed you, Leslie, about May 9th, which is the council.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So the city council is, we've got a new council seated, and so they want to meet with all the department heads and meet with all the commissions about things, and so planning is coming up on May 9th. And so a topic they have already talked about with me on the side through a few emails is they want to know what we're doing about the master plan, city plan. And
Very good.
getting
I'm gonna
there.
pull up the email right now.
So they want to talk about the plan, what our schedule is for it, and I said, well, really, we want to have an opportunity to sit down with you guys to know, is this a priority for the council? I think it will be, which basically is going to give them give us the green light to move forward on what we were going to be doing anyways, but we kind of dragged our feet a little bit waiting for the new council to get seated, so we would be able to kind of get their blessing to move forward on a strategy that says we're going to do this in an incremental way, building towards having a plan. And it sounds like from some of the other conversations that the council is very interested in having a strategic approach at the council level as well. So I think our idea of a strategic city plan will also kind of dovetail into their plans as well. They want benchmarks, they want a strategy, set some goals, identify ways that we're going to accomplish those goals, and then kind of set everybody out to get some work done. So May 9th is when they're going to do that. So if we have some folks on the planning commission who want to join me, more than welcome to that night.
I'd be happy to appear, but I would encourage others that are interested to.
Sure.
I'll try.
Yeah, at least
I feel like the chair should probably be there.
meet the, or at least get
One of
an
my
opportunity to
duties.
meet the council. And
Yeah. We should probably figure out what our strategic plan is for making progress on the city plan over the course of the year before that meeting. I mean, that's one thought is, I don't want you or me to get up there and us to have no clue of what we hope to accomplish this year. We've talked a little bit about how we're gonna start the process. It's the first time this commission has gone through it, so I don't know what's a realistic expectation of how much we can accomplish in the calendar year of 2018. Or if we should be thinking beyond that, but.
I think certainly to start to know what we would try to get through in the first year would be good.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to lay it all out, because I think kind of to lay out a 3 or 4 year plan would, so much can happen between the first couple of, the first year you'll kind of have an idea of how far this is going to take. Our 2-year zoning process took 7 years. Not that we want this to take 7 years, but you
Well,
just never know what one thing is going to get thrown in there to
I think
slow
the
you down.
scope of the city plan is equally broad as the zoning. And, I mean, we're gonna be covering a lot of topics and having to balance when there's conflict between them, and it's gonna be a long process, so, or
Mhm.
maybe it doesn't have to be a long process, but it certainly is a large scope. And
Yep.
that's,
I certainly think laying out for council that our goal is to come up with this first initial, whether it's housing, and I don't know what the energy committee was comment with, but our thought is if we come up with, a first template which gets us our framework set up, our database set up on how we're gonna do it, kind of sets up a process. We can work through that process once and know this works. Now we just gotta start to run transportation, energy, land use, all these pieces start to get run through this same process over whether it's 3 or whether it's 4. And some of this is going to be a little back and forth with the council, because the more priorities they have, the less, I have the same amount of staff. So the more I get
Yeah.
divided up, the slower this is going to take, unless they're going to allocate funds for us to hire outside consultants to do the work. So there's going to be a certain amount of what their priorities are beyond the city plan, and also what resources they're willing to kind of put to make this happen. Because it certainly obviously goes faster if you've got more people working, so.
well, let's hear what the energy committee thoughts are, and then maybe we can talk about what sort of timeline we wanna aim towards as a group, and we can think a little bit more about that. We don't have to come up with a plan that we're gonna stick to, but we can be thinking about it, so. Barb, what was the?
Well, as you may or may not know, the Energy Committee's been working on this for several years. So we came up, and I looked at my files, and the last revision was 6/15. So we sort of stopped when all the zoning and everything else was going on, and the level of uncertainty in terms of how we were going to proceed on this. But we wanted to have a document that, in the Energy Committee, wanted to have a document that gave us specific benchmarks and specific goals over certain time periods. Now, I realize that the way we've broken it up initially may not fit quite into Mike's scheme, because what we thought of as goals were probably more like strategies. But anyway, I'll talk about that in a minute. Couple of things came up, we talked about quite a bit. One of the concerns in the committee was how, as part of the master plan, which the ideas of the net zero competition, particularly the five finalists, really not looking at anything else, how we were going to integrate some of those ideas into, and I explained that it was more of a mapping kind of exercise, had more to do with land use potentially than the section that we're working on right now. But it's still that they were very anxious to make sure that something moves forward on that, because there's sort of been this lag. And I realize in talking with Mike about it that his department needs to get directed by city council in order to be able to take that on in any formal way. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we just need to get some direction so we can start putting resources towards different projects.
Right. So, I'm gonna sort of dive into that. I spoke with Ann Watson about it too, and see, from the council standpoint, how they might want to approach it. Because if the council needs to act first before we can even talk about it as part of the master plan, then I think it has to start with them.
My guess would be that if we're recommending adoption of various elements of that the council would then consider it and make a decision.
Right, but we can't
Recommending
even.
it as part of the city plan.
It's like chicken and egg here. We can't get started until Mike has direction from the council that, yes, we should look at elements of all of the plans.
Right. Have we affirmatively, is this, we know this for certain? I mean, this is,
I think what we'll need is just, we were at a small pause because of where the last council left things. There was some members, there was never a vote, but there were some members of the council who had approved the master plan that was approved, and didn't want the planning commission to spend more time working on a revised city plan, master plan. So that was the council that was here before. They've now been replaced. So because we had a council that was basically saying, don't work on the city plan, the planning department was kind of left saying, we kind of need to wait and see what happens on the elections in March, and then wait for the new council. So we were pretty sure, based on who was running and who was going to be elected, as to the direction of the new council, but we really couldn't overstep where we were. Even though we knew some of them weren't running for re-election, we still knew we really couldn't move forward.
so this wasn't to do with the bridges net zero. I don't know how familiar you are with there was a contest.
The design competition.
Yeah,
that's how it
remember
was.
that?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm confused as to whether you received, the last you heard was direction not to work on the city plan, or not to work on the bridges proposal, or not to do either.
There was a little bit of both, but there was, during the adoption process, comments that were made by more than one member of council about not wanting the planning department to spend more time doing a new city plan or master plan, because they would rather have the planning department working on other priorities.
But that's what we're doing now, is the new city plan.
Yes.
Okay.
But we haven't really jumped in with both feet, because we've kind of been waiting for this, as January and February were kind of rolling along, we're kind of like, well, we really kind of need to wait,
This
but then there was
explains a lot.
Then there was a
Yeah.
discussion of, well, let's wait till after the election so we can formally get to the new council, so we can formally make a recommendation. And we should, as a commission, or you should, as a commission, make a recommendation that says, we think you should direct staff to work on a new city plan, because we think this will be
I
a valuable.
didn't realize you were under this,
Sorry, I
your
wasn't
hands were
clear
tied
about
like
that.
this.
I didn't realize they went
No,
that
Mike and I
far.
had a lot of emails back and forth where he's like, we're waiting, and I'm like, well, no, I wanna move forward.
Yeah, right.
So now it makes a lot more
Oh,
sense
okay.
why you were saying things like that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that had been, you were,
I must have missed it.
yeah, or it may have been a meeting you weren't at when they had that explanation that.
Can
I thought it was a
certain
choice.
aspects of the city plan be adopted as amendments to the existing plan? For example, an energy plan?
If we did a full, it really comes down to that it's gonna be difficult to kinda amend this plan into a new plan just because of its format. But we can certainly go through and see how we could try to integrate it. We may go through and be able to selectively, you know, delete a section out of the existing master plan and then put an addendum on, which as we take pieces off here and add pieces on here, that we would eventually end up in a place where we've got it. But we'll have to explore legally and functionally how that would work.
Well, I have this optimistic theory that good ideas will drive out bad ones. So I would like to hear Barbara's thinking and her committee's thinking, because it might be something we might say, hey, council, this is something you could do. We could have some foreseeable results in the next X years.
Well, and we were concerned on the Energy Committee because we feel like we have a 2030 deadline. And so, because
Yeah.
the city has.
Yeah, the clock's ticking
Yeah,
on
the
that,
clock
yeah.
is ticking and we're just like, kind of sitting there being very anxious. So that's why we jumped into the energy plan in the way we did. Also because originally we wanted to integrate it with the regional plan. But that ended up not making sense. So strictly kind of a regional, an energy plan for the city.
So just for background, why did the city council not want to jump into the city plan process?
I think it was a certain amount, and this is obviously interpreting other people's opinions, but my sense was they were pretty well tired of. I mean, they had. I met with them 20 times, so 20 council meetings in 2017. I met with them to talk about zoning. So the thought that I would be back in 2018 to start to meet with them about, bringing them chapters and discussions of what do you guys think about this for an approach for housing, and what do you think about this for approach for energy? I think some of them were pretty much like, we don't want to see you. We think you should spend your time working on other things. And I think there's a certain amount of that that played into that that approach. And I think this city plan opens the door to a lot of potentially contentious. This is where we work out a lot of. The rubber hits the road. This is where water quality is going to run into economic development, and this is where in your downtowns. So do we have more or less development in our downtowns where we want less impervious cover? So we're gonna have to come up and make hard decisions and make those hard balancing decisions. And I think some of the council was just like, we've spent 50 hours with you working on zoning, and we're about done. We need to work on other things. So that would be my guess, is they were kind of just a little burned out from that. But at the same time, I do know that the certain members of the council have very direct goals, whether it's housing or energy or.
Yeah,
I haven't met the new
They were eager
councilors.
to move forward with the city plan,
So I think if we go there with a presentation and with a recommendation that says, look, we can't move forward without your authorization, our recommendation is direct the city manager and planning staff to move forward with the approach of doing a couple chapters a year and coming up with some kind of quality, and to start with, and we recommend starting with housing and energy as our two first chapters, because those seem to be the two most timely ones for us to work on.
And I'm wondering, in reference to the design competition finalists, is there some way to integrate that into our land use considerations as well, rather than waiting till the end, because it sort of seems like some of the issues that were raised in those plans are front and center now, with proposals that are coming up.
I thought we discussed looking at that in our context of our land use map as an initial cut at priorities for the city.
So we will look at the land use map initial, at the
Yeah, the
beginning.
Bridges proposal could be a really useful start to our future land use map. That was my understanding of how we were gonna, if other people
I
have
think,
thoughts on that.
well, not only that one, but the other, I think there were a lot of great ideas that came, obviously from that project, but some of the other proposals.
Right,
That
so
would play
yeah.
into some of our ideas and thinking, feeding into it.
Yeah, the Energy Committee was certainly interested in looking at all 5 of the finalists, or at least the 4 of them. So I guess I hadn't heard before that we would take up the land use map early on, or initially even.
Yeah, it was a discussion that we started before we hit the pause button on the development of a new city plan. Remember when John printed out that large scale
Mhm.
map and we put Post-its on it of what we thought we would wanna change, evolve, maintain? Or I
Right,
don't know if I'm
yeah.
using the right terms,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
it-
that's
that-
where I hope we could maybe go, or how the council, we could maybe present this to the council instead of like an issue by issue approach. If they think of it as what's different about Montpelier in, a decade, and then once we can identify that, we can work towards it. But a lot of those things will cover issues from housing, energy, land use. Like they're not different. They're all-
So-
But instead of being abstract, they'll be on a map. It'll be
Right, which
much
I
more-
think is really a good idea and a good way to present it to the council. So I guess the only question I want to make sure is that those design competition finalists their thoughts are included. And now that we have, a new commission, we're going to probably need to be able to sit down and take a look at those in
Oh,
a
yeah.
more concerted way.
Could we get them to come and show and tell here?
Well, there are 5 groups.
Well, but you were gonna try to summarize, or at least, draw some
Right.
consistent principles out of it.
Right, so I think, one thought might be to have the 5 presentation boards up from
Mhm.
each of the
And you guys tape
finalists.
recorded their presentations.
Right, yeah, so if people
If people
wanted
wanna
to
watch the
go on to
videos.
Orca and see the videos, they could do that.
I think if the energy committee has specific aspects of the proposals that are particularly important to the committee, it would be helpful to know that. That's an area where, you yourself wouldn't have to do all the work, but, if the committee has opinions about these, we certainly would wanna hear them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be at a later phase. Right now, they just want to make sure that we're paying attention to it, paying attention to the 5 finalists as part of our process.
We know it's there,
So.
and we will look at it.
So we can set a date, right, or whatever. All right, so that was one of the points that they brought up, that we discussed. Because it does seem like that whole,
Excuse me, did you just make a decision that we're gonna hear from the 5 finalists at some point in this
No,
commission?
no, I just said we know they're around. I don't know if we can pull out all the 5 finalists to give us a presentation. I think that might not be the most realistic. But I think if the energy committee and maybe like the housing task force committee, if the various committees that are working on chapters can make recommendations about these proposals and what they think are important to adopt, I think that would be really useful.
Well, my
See,
knowledge of
yeah.
the competition is a little vague, frankly, because I just didn't get to see it all for some
Right,
reason or
right.
another.
so I think that's the thing that the Energy Committee wants, is that the commission actually has a chance to sit down and look at those 5 finalists. You can certainly go to their presentations on Orcas, as Mike mentioned. I'm not sure that that's going to necessarily inform them. We can, I could have somebody come in from the Sustainable Montpelier Coalition to talk about the various plans. We could certainly get the 2 top plans, or Montpelier architects, and they could certainly talk about those, if you wanted to have the actual people come in, yeah.
Yeah, I would, and I'd like to see some of the, the visuals of.
Absolutely.
Those are,
Bring us up to date on it.
Yeah.
you can watch the presentations and see the visuals online, and I think the production quality is actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's just not the
Use them
same,
yet, yeah.
it's not the same as seeing the board. I mean, the Bridges board is 10 feet tall, 8 feet tall. It's huge. Yeah, so I think, and if we could set them up in the council chambers and just look at them individually, as some of the other, in the past, those kinds of presentations went on.
I hate to say it, but anything I see electronically has a certain unreality to it. I'd rather have a real human being with a poster saying, this is what we want to do with it.
Maybe what we can do is set up a time for somebody to come in either from Sustainable Development from Montpelier, and present, kind of give us an overview of these projects, but as homework for that day, we can watch the presentations.
Okay,
Is that
all
okay?
right, that would be good,
So
yes.
we have a lot more background going into it,
Background,
and then
right.
we can.
And then just, that way, we could have just one visual, potentially, from each team.
The boards are
Rather
great.
than, they produced, and many more, 8 or 10
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so let me see if I will get the, website, the, link to the Orca video.
Thank you.
And I will get the boards.
Great,
Okay.
and let me know who to reach out to.
For.
We
the-
can talk about this
Yeah.
more.
Okay, all right, so that was one piece, sorry to drag that one out, they wanted to make sure that was included. And then the second thing was this discussion about goals and how we proceed with goals. And there was a pretty strong feeling that the Energy Committee would like to hear about, at least initially, what all of the committees are thinking about, all the committees that will contribute a chapter, are thinking about for their goals, rather than go through 2 by 2. Because I think doing it that way is, I felt it was too disjointed, and they sort of agreed. They really want, the Energy Committee talked about, well, could we have a meeting where committee chairs of each of those committees that are offering chapters come into a common meeting with identifying 5 or 6 goals. These are the goals that my committee thinks they want to have. And so we could blend them together and see where there are overlaps. Because we don't want to go ahead with doing a lot of work on the Energy Committee if we're going to be overlapping with transportation. So that's the kind of interest they had in our process, especially because we have identified so many goals, and in some cases we're already working towards those. And I brought copies. I realize in looking at them now, they really don't fit into Mike's
It's okay, it's the ideas that are,
Yeah.
that are important, we can.
So, this was just a kind of, I didn't have enough copies.
You can check.
This was just sort of a very, and I think Mike's seen an earlier version of this, but these were some of the kinds of goals, the way we set it up. These are, goals should be, perhaps be more overarching. And I think the other thing that would really help, as we talked about before, was Mike putting together an example of the format to give to each committee in terms of, here's the aspiration, here's the goal, here's the strategy. Which one am I reading now? Something.
There's the aspirations, goals, and strategies. There's just the 3.
Just the 3. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry to do this all in bold. My computer was going crazy. But these are the kinds of things that we've been looking at, because we want to be able to, not all of these we can benchmark, but many of these we want to be able to provide, give ourselves targets to work against. So, but thinking about all the other committees, coming in with 5 or 6 goals on each of those committees would really be helpful, particularly if you look at the transportation ones. We've got a lot of detailed ideas about what to do about transportation, including reducing it significantly. But if that's not the Transportations Committee goal, then, we're going to be clashing. And we'd rather find that out now.
Could be good idea to have like a pecha kucha type setup with if each committee gets time, like 5 minutes timed and 5 slides
Great.
to present or something.
How many committees would we be talking about that are actually contributing chapters, Mike?
Oh, housing, energy, transportation,
8 or 10?
land use. Okay, utilities and facilities, I don't think we actually have a committee for that. Education would probably be in there,
You got housing, energy, right?
yeah. Just seeing what the required
Yeah, the,
pieces. I mean, we've got a recreation, we've got natural resources, which would be Conservation Commission. So I mean, we're probably, or maybe it's not as many as we think. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 right there.
so if you said 8 to 10 in case
Yeah.
you left somebody out. So can 10 people work on a pecha kucha?
Yeah, I mean
10
it's
different presentations.
that's 50 minutes, it's an
Mhm.
hour.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful.
I think
And-
we'll just have to get, I think once we get the digital piece, the online piece to help, that'll help the different committees be able to plug into their piece in a format that helps to make it so that way there's a little bit of consistency between them. Even though we're not really rating them or judging them or evaluating them right now, they at least will all be in the same format where you can go through and say, okay, now we can start having a more of a discussion about substance now that everybody's in the same format.
So you could offer them a template on our
Yeah.
Google Drive.
Yeah.
And then they could go in and input their goals, and we could just say, this is just the first step, and some of these will get refined as we
Yeah,
go
we'll
along.
work back and forth though.
I like the idea of having everyone in the room at the same time, because I think that will help us not to overlap potentially, and make the whole process maybe a little bit more efficient.
What's that word you use? Patchu.
Oh, pecha kuchas are great.
Pecha kucha, I'm not
Please
familiar
explain,
with that.
John.
I think it comes from Japan and maybe the architects world. The architects started doing this, and it's actually like 20 slides in 6 minutes, and you have like
They're timed, right?
they're timed,
Yep.
yeah. They're
Yeah.
whether
Yeah, and it's
you want
rigid.
it to go or not, it's moving. And the idea is, maybe lightning talks is like a
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
that's-
keeps people from getting off on a tangent,
Right.
wandering off, and getting behind schedule. They're just once you hit go, your presentation's going to run for its 6 minutes, and you've got to get through all of your content, and so.
Yeah,
Do
and
that
you're not
for our
required.
agendas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not required to have, 20 slides, but I guess that's the max that they kind of recommend, but there would be no discussion during this. This is just the presentation.
Yeah.
And it might be great as a challenge to the committees to come up with their goals and present them that way.
Well, I think it's a good way at the beginning of the process. We're going to start looking at these chapters individually to have some sort of kickoff, something that brings them together.
Mhm.
And then we need to be making sure throughout the process that we're coordinating all of that work. Because you're right, the transportation and energy things are really going to be, a lot of them are going to be related. So if we just work on one at a time, and then if housing is first and then we're done, and then a year and a half from now we're talking about transportation and, we didn't change those goals and now they don't match. It has to be consistent. There needs to be some sort of cohesion.
At least a preliminary discussion of
That
it,
would help to start
Yeah.
it and make sure that we're being consistent.
And we're not overlapping
Yeah.
as much as possible. So, I know you and Kirby were gonna write up a
Mhm.
letter that was going to go to all of the committee chairs.
Yeah, well, we with the delay in the meeting, we didn't
Right,
do it
okay.
yet, so we could use this as the opportunity to invite everyone to that.
I think, it's gonna take presenting them with a package of, information, like
Yeah.
Mike's sample, and saying that we would like to get all of the committee, I hope, we'd like to get all the committees together.
I don't know if there's like a date and like a venue that we could have this in that's not here.
Yeah.
That could be followed up by like social time, because after that it's nice for people to connect and
Right.
go talk about each other's ideas, and that's not like
This.
I
you
love
can't
City
go
Hall,
there.
but
Yeah, it's not
Nobody's
conducive.
grabbing drinks and talking about,
Yes. And even if, 2 people from each committee come, there's 20 different people in here, it's not easy. Is that something that could happen, Mike?
I think it could. I think it's just gonna take it'll be a little bit later, and I say that because once we get the framework ready, I'm just trying to think, we get a framework ready, I would have to meet with all these different committees to kind of give them the framework, explain to them what we're gonna do, give them a meeting. Some of these committees meet only once a month. So for them to come up with their 5 goals and to develop this, so they're ready to then meet, it may be something that happens closer to the summer, just based on the amount of time it may take.
Yeah, I'm
A
thinking
committee that meets once a month, like a housing committee or a transportation committee that meets once a month, it might be tricky.
Well, the Energy Committee was hoping that you wouldn't have to meet with each one individually, and maybe that means that there would have to be 2 group meetings. The first one to present the format and give them examples for the kinds of goals that we'd all be looking for, and then the second one to actually present their goals. I would.
So you met with various committees previously. So they all should have been thinking about goals in one way or another previously, right? So I'm wondering if it makes the most sense to pick a date a month and a half or 2 months out from now, put together a package that would go to each committee that would say, you are invited to this event, to send a representative, or as many of you who can attend, great. And I think I would put this together, or Kirby and I would put this together, particularly in light of my new knowledge about planning department's direction. And it would invite them to this event, which would then have some sort of social aspect after it. It would introduce the online working components that we're going to try to use, so that they could, here's where we're gonna have these Google Docs, and you can edit your doc, and then once you sent that recommendation to planning commission, they would have we would have the drafting authority over that document, so there would just be a single committee with custodian over each document at a time. And we would also ask for their recommendations about the 5 finalists from Net Zero, and whether there were any aspects of those projects that they thought as a committee were particularly important. And I think that could kick off this discussion, and it would be, I like how both John and Barb have explained how you think that, and Stephanie, harmonizing all of these committees from the start is really the most important thing that we can do at this stage. At least as the commission that's going to ultimately be bringing this together, we might as well start it that way. And then folks will feel like they're all part of a team, they can go off and make more specific proposals based on the goals that we've discussed, and then we can all come back together again.
So you're thinking that this meeting where the framework's introduced, that we would still ask them to bring a general sense of their major goals?
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
they're invited to this meeting and present present the goals that they have, that they've discussed, within a 5-minute presentation.
Right. Maybe not as formal as a education. It takes some preparation, I think. I don't know, John, have you participated, I imagine?
yeah, I failed miserably at those.
Oh.
No, they can be fun, and I think 20 is a lot. So when you limit it to 5, it becomes much easier, and I think if you let people know that don't let perfect be the enemy of good, and that this should be fun, not something that you would be judged on, or that this should be more kind of introductory to explain who you are and maybe a general idea of people's thinking.
What their goals are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many committees are there?
Well, they're just trying to count.
Well, there are 20-some committees, 20 to 30.
Yeah, there are a lot of 20, there's
Are
like
they
almost
really
20.
all active?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of them that we're trying to combine. So we've got, I mean, you have a housing task force and a housing trust fund committee. You've got, you know, we were managed to combine. We used to have parking, bicycles,
Road.
Pedestrian.
pedestrian,
Pedestrian,
yeah, bike,
right.
pedestrian, parking, and transportation were all separate. And then we combined them into one, and then got split back out into two anyway. So.
I think we
Yeah.
compete with South Burlington for the most.
Well, we've got to. It's.
I think we probably beat them. I mean,
They're pretty
We have a
good.
committee for everything.
Oh, okay.
In fact, we even had an
South
appointment for a
Burlington for the
committee
most
of committees.
How about historic preservation?
Historic preservation would be another committee that would be,
Okay, I wasn't sure if they were fitting in, yeah.
yep. That's
Well,
another one.
I think this would be a great, way to move this forward, and if we can do this soon, Ms. Leslie, she was suggesting maybe the next 6 weeks.
So, Mike, are you waiting for that May 9th meeting, the city council, to really know whether we should be moving forward with this?
We would probably want to have it happen after. I mean, we could certainly send out a letter, start having the discussions, you know, late May. I was thinking late May, early June. We would have the kickoff meeting, you know, the social kickoff meeting, as Leslie was saying, introduce the online components of this, introduce the goals concept, presentation of Net Zero Vermont. You know, this is the kickoff of a process that leads to a second meeting later in the, well, by that point it would be in the summer, where we would have the committees all show up to kind of present their 5 goals.
Oh, I was hoping that would happen at this first meeting.
So they're gonna have in the next
So
6 weeks,
that's
and they
why
would have the 5?
it would be critical to have the kind of communication with them presenting, you know, that we'd like you to identify at least some initial goals. And as Leslie said, they've hopefully been thinking about this for some time.
Okay, so you're hoping to have the goals at that one as well.
Right, and I don't know about the presentation on the competition, the 5 finalists. Do people think that would be a worthwhile thing to present to the committees?
But you're gonna get a link so we can at least look at that.
Right, I would definitely think that we want to discuss it
Mhm.
here. I just don't know in the format of this committee meeting.
I'm not sure that fits in, but it's hard, I think we would need to, I think we should look at it first, and then we
Yeah.
can decide if that fits. I'm not sure that it would.
When, during the competition, invitations went out to, I sent invitations to all of the pertinent committees to come, and several did. I'm not sure transportation did, natural resources, housing, so they sent, at least took a kind of an individual look at it with that lens, with their committee lens in place.
It could definitely go out maybe with some background and invitation material.
Sure, yeah.
For those who are very involved with it or already attended a lot of it, they may not be as interested in seeing it represented.
Yeah, yeah. But a lot of people have forgotten about some aspects of it too, so, okay, so.
So, I mean, if they're gonna be doing some presentations of goals, that just may push it a little bit farther, maybe into June. As I said, a few of these committees only meet once a month, so.
So we gotta get this invitation out soon.
Yeah, to get them and have them have an opportunity to kind of talk about things.
At least one meeting prior.
Yeah, and
I've
if
been
they
told
need to
that the
develop them.
Conservation Commission's chapter is drafted.
Oh, okay.
Is it? Yeah, so they could have an April.
Yeah, some of them may be farther ahead than others. I know historic preservation isn't, they're working on other things right now with the zoning.
So you're thinking, is it possible to do it late May then, at a point at which the committees might have been able to have 2 meetings? Assuming it gets out at the beginning of April.
So this is because the Energy Committee is anxious to move forward and.
Well, yeah, and it sort of sets the whole
Yeah.
groundwork for our work too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as I see it, and, yeah, and I,
The challenge is gonna be coming out of my office is how much I
Right.
can try to be able to get through. Next week's the last week, today's the last day for taking applications for the new zoning administrator. So we'll be bringing a new person on with the new zoning, so that'll be,
when does
next week.
oh.
I mean, the good news is this stage doesn't require a heavy lift from your office because we're asking the committees to present goals, and they certainly have background enough that they can do that.
Yeah.
Whether they have, so goals to include, I could just send something that says, we're interested to hear what your top goals are for inclusion in the next city plan, and we want to discuss them as a big group, and I think it's always nice when you can attend their meetings in advance of those things, but I don't think it's necessary. And if, to that end, if in the invitation I could say, if you, need help understanding how that would fit into the city plan, a member from the planning commission could potentially attend your meeting, and you can take volunteers if needed.
Spread out the effort.
Yeah.
Mike's office, yeah.
Yeah, you certainly shouldn't have to do all of that on your own.
And we could, and the letter could tell them that there will be basically the format that we're looking for, a template of the format, so they can understand how all-encompassing goals might be, would be on their approval.
So I think, I should identify a location, a venue, and then I think all of us should be at that event, so I might send out a doodle poll, figure out the best date. I don't think that having the event during our usual
Monday
meeting
at
time
5.
is gonna be the best way to get people involved.
Except that it may be conflicting with the fewest other committee meetings, but I don't know.
Well, I was thinking a weekend actually might be the
Wow.
least inconvenient for most people.
It's probably true.
I think weeknights are challenging. What are others' thoughts? Any thoughts on this?
Breakfast.
I think they'll all be challenging.
They're all gonna be
I
challenging.
wouldn't I don't think weekends will be any better
Provide food.
than.
7 a.m.
Yeah, on
That's your
Saturday.
best-
That would
that's
be-
Not a
your
Saturday,
time to
yeah.
shine, John?
Oh, boy.
Probably will go first.
At 7 a.m. on
Yeah,
Saturday?
yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Well, I'll be up.
Yeah, I know you will be.
Oh, will you be
I will
ready?
have been up for at least an hour.
Kirby will be up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, okay,
Okay,
well,
well, why don't you and Mike select some dates and put out a doodle poll, and
okay,
we'll see.
think about that.
We'll give them a fair amount of warning, because 2 months is a pretty good amount of warning about this meeting and how important it is that the committee be represented. This isn't just if you wanna come, it's really necessary. For the planning commission, as a body that's the kind of the overarching effort.
Well, they could volunteer one of their members to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sacrifice one.
Yeah, sacrificial lamb.
Okay,
So
thanks.
the May 9th meeting with the council, I'm going to attend. Hopefully others will be interested in attending as well. And Mike, your sense about that was just, it was like a overview of what we plan to do this coming year?
Yeah, so like this Wednesday, they're talking with the city manager and finance departments, I think, about, it's really kind of an education opportunity for the new counselors, who's the city manager, what is finance, what do they do?
Mm-hmm.
Another meeting, they'll bring in the police department and the fire department. They'll talk about what are the emergency services and what are the big issues for them. And we're up on the night to talk about what is the planning department, what do we do, what are our needs, what are our goals that we do. So it's usually just it's an opportunity to educate. It's an opportunity to make sure that we kind of end up having them understand how we fit into the bigger picture. Because we like to point out when the council finally puts out their goals, they'll usually come out with this list of about 10 or 12 goals, and usually about 8 of them come back to the manager and the planning department working together on something. And although we're one of the smaller departments and have one of the smaller budgets, it's one of these ones where a lot of the routine things are done by places like DPW. There isn't a goal to plow the streets. It's just part of having a city. And but usually when you're talking about trying to change things and move things and solve the parking problems or net zero 2030 or whatever the goal is, it usually is going to end up coming back to the planning department to kind of make that change happen.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So I'll try to have Seth at the next meeting, because obviously if we're going to try to move this forward, we'll have to have if we're going to point people to a Google Drive, we'll have to actually have one set up.
Yeah, so I can draft something that we can discuss at the next meeting,
Yeah,
and we can add in whatever Seth helps us with.
yeah, the more
after
ideas
that.
you have on what you would like to see on this shared drive and how you want it laid out, as I said, this is really outside of anything I can make any recommendations on. Not my specialty. I lean on other people.
But your format is what we're looking at, so that's just the technology.
Yeah, and my format really was just kind of lay out a starting point, and not really to be an end point, but a kind of a place to start to have the conversation on where and how we want to organize our goals and strategies, and if planning commission and committees want to take it to a different direction, they're welcome to.
Okay. Anything else on the city plan? Okay, let's move on. Item 6, upcoming zoning amendments.
Okay.
So see if we can, how fast we can get through
Yeah,
it.
this won't take too long because I don't actually have the amendments drafted up. What I did want to kind of start to point to the things have slowed up and rear its ugly heads a little bit. So you saw a picture here, a little thing with Google, with a little Google picture and a map behind it. So this is just a for instance. So the for instance, for the map, this is Berlin Street, and this is Wheelock Street that goes down. So this showed up on our natural resources inventory map as a stream, and under our riparian zoning rules, you must set back from the stream, and so you can't build and you can't do these things, and so you can see, looking at the map, that it actually is running pretty close to buildings. And the irony, of course, is if you look at the Google view, there actually isn't any stream there. So it's one of these.
What if it's underground like the
It
other
is
one?
buried. It
Yeah.
has been channelized, which is our, which, just certainly is just one of the things that we think we would just go through and edit this map to make a recommendation to change the natural resources map to take this stream off.
Yep.
And not regulate it as a stream because it's actually in a culvert. So you shouldn't have a 25-foot riparian setback from a stream that's buried.
There's one of those that we caught before the.
We did catch one, yeah.
Yeah.
This is just a much longer one that happened to, somebody was doing a project up on Berlin Street, and we noticed, oh, you actually can't put a shed in because it's in the riparian setback. So, and we figure we'll find these periodically because we changed the rules as much as we did. That's just one example. Another one, larger one, deals with landscaping requirements. So we had some questions. There was setbacks for parking areas was one that came up. So parking areas have to be 5 feet from a property line, and we had a proposal on the parking lot that is behind the drawing board, behind where we're going to be purchasing the M&M Beverage building. We're going to be tearing it down. We're going to be building a parking lot. Well, according to the new zoning, that parking lot would have to stop and have a 5-foot buffer from the rest of the parking lot because that's where the property line is. There's no exemption for a parking lot that actually connects to another parking lot to simply have a continuous parking lot. So I believe they gave a waiver or variance for that, but it's one of the ones that there should be either some express discussion about, what happens if, John and I have 2 commercial buildings and we just want to have the parking lot connect between the 2. We wouldn't be allowed to do that. We could have a road that connects between the 2, but we actually couldn't have parking spaces that just keep going.
So that 5-foot setback is in all districts then, including the urban core. So would it be enough to change that for the 2 urban core districts?
It could be. We just need to come up with some solutions, and that's just one case that came out.
I don't know if we'd want to get rid of the 5-foot setback. We put it there because we wanted to have it for the street.
And I think some of
For a lot
these,
of
yeah,
reasons.
certainly we could exempt it from the front setback because you would never obviously have a parking lot joining another parking lot on a front setback. But
You shouldn't be able to put in a front parking lot.
and you can't put in a new
necessarily.
front
Right,
parking
but
lot.
it makes sense from other even side yards in terms of dealing with runoff and from your paved parking area in your neighbor's property. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, so we had, but there were a couple of questions like that. What is channelized? That wasn't an issue, that was yours. That was a problem that was created by the city council when they decided to decided to enforce riparian buffers in the downtown. They said, well, anywhere that's channelized, you don't have to meet that requirement. And the first application that came through, DRB didn't know what channelized was and didn't know how to enforce it. We've had a number of issues with signs already, which we knew when we did our sign rules that we were going to have problems with them. So we're going to probably have to come back with something. They're just different issues, particularly with things like price signs. You can have signs, you can have price signs, but you can't have the digital price signs. And it's just weird where they're allowed and where they're not allowed. But the big one that's come up on a number of these has been the landscaping requirements, which just they're very specific, and that was why I handed out, you'll notice some of my notes that are in the other pages of 320, I believe.
Oh,
yeah,
here they
so
are.
there are a couple on point H. How far for trees to count. So for parking lot landscaping, it says you need a certain amount of landscaping for a parking lot, but it doesn't really say where the trees have to be. So is a tree that's 5 feet from the edge of the parking lot, does that count? What about 8 feet? What about 10 feet? Doesn't really tell us where a tree has to be to count as parking lot landscaping. And then I have a note on the next page for point G1, trees to shrubs. So there's very specific in G1 that says a minimum of 1 shrub is required for each 5 feet and 1 tree is required for each 30 feet of exterior principal building perimeter. What if I had 8 trees and 50 shrubs and a project has 10 trees and 40 shrubs? What about flowering beds? What about other options for landscaping? Your only landscaping options you have are trees and shrubs. And there's no definition of where those trees or shrubs can be planted or need to be planted. It just says for every foot of building perimeter you need to go and plant so many trees. So we actually had a proposal on Route 302 that had, I don't know, it maybe half an acre lot, but a portion of it is up on the forested hill. So they're like, well, I mean, how many of those trees count towards our trees?
Oh, because it's in their property.
It's on the property, and there's no requirement in here that says this is where and how you count the trees. So this is where kind of the technical parts of
Yeah.
zoning, the reality hits of, okay, how do I count a tree? How do I count a shrub? And what if I have, if I have more trees, can I count a tree to a shrub? You know, does one tree,
Well, what was the overall intention that we had? We wanted to put trees in to lower the heat effect of the parking lots, right?
well, in this case, those were just general landscaping requirements that said for every
Aesthetic.
building foot,
Right, right.
you had to put so many.
But that's what I'm wondering, you know, can we more clearly identify what the goal is, which would help us to kind of determine where they should be? I mean, when I saw the plan in figure 3-19, I was a little surprised that you hadn't gotten more pushback from the tree board, because some of those islands, the trees are not likely to survive very well in those islands. And then, of course, you don't really want to put trees up next to your building, because that's going to destroy the foundation. So, you know, some of these other ones are potentially problematic too. So I don't know that we want to be as specific as saying,
Yeah.
you know, it has to go here and here, but what's the goal? What do we want?
And
Why do we
and
want it?
and can a tree be counted twice? So if you're required to have 17 trees as a result of your building size, and you have 14 trees as shading for your parking lot, do those trees count towards your, can you, are they
I mean,
additive?
the
Sure,
goal
yeah.
is screening. I mean, it's right here. So it's like parking lot landscaping and screening, and it's aesthetic. The aesthetic value of that, I would assume,
Mhm.
is the point of it. Given that the word screening is the primary word, so you know, so that you have a little bit of screening when you're looking from the building. You don't see all the cars, or looking from another building. It's not just a bunch of cars in the parking lot.
But our
So-
example doesn't exactly
Fair
show
enough.
them as screening trees.
Yeah, and then the other one that we ran into is just how to handle pre-existing, pre-developed lots. Because we have just rules that come in for, let me give an example. There is, somebody wants to, on Berry Street, put in an outdoor deck and expand, and they don't meet the landscaping requirements. But because they're going out and doing an expansion, they have to meet the landscaping requirements because it's requiring a site plan. We don't have anything that grandfathers that says as long as you don't do this, or if you make a small change, you're only need to make a small amount of change. It's, if you want to build a deck on the side of your commercial building, you're going to need to first come into compliance, which is going to require you to put in $25,000 worth of trees and shrubs and vegetation. Because we don't have a pre-existing condition that says if, you know, for pre-existing, pre-developed sites, this is how we're going to handle it. In some communities, what they would do is to put a cost thing that would say at no point will the city require more than 2% or 5% of any project to be required to spend on landscaping. So if you did have a project which said, you know, we're a restaurant, we'd like to expand our deck, we're going to put a new deck on here, it's going to cost us $10,000, we couldn't charge more than $500 of improvements to the landscaping. Even though it would take $25,000 to fully come into compliance, they're going to come into compliance $500 more. Or you just need to have some kind of factor that gives you an out. Otherwise, you're going to end up killing a lot of redevelopment proposals on existing lots.
Those decks would fall under minor site plans, right?
They can sometimes, but minor site plans are not exempt from landscape requirements.
Right, yeah, so I mean, is
They
that a
just don't
place
have to get
start,
a perpetual,
or-
they just don't, or others. We just need to have some way from our office, because this is the number one issue we have is landscaping. Some of these other ones, outdoor lighting has big standards, but it has an out clause in the bottom that says you can go to the DRB and get a waiver. There's no waiver requirement for landscaping. Everybody's got to meet that requirement. So there are no outs, there are no dollar outs, so we kind of got a number of these applications that have come in where people have pretty much walked away because I got a small project, I'm a non-conforming lot, and I can't meet these new requirements. So, these are the types of things that I'm gonna try to draft up some rules for you guys, or, we may, if you want, and this was a little bit of today's conversation I was just gonna have is how would you guys like me to do this? Would you like me to put together a proposal? Do you wanna just kinda talk about each issue individually? Want me to just kinda collect up the issues, bring the issue to you, and then have you kinda say, this is how we think this would be best issued, and then I can write something up?
I like your tables with the problem and your recommended solution.
Yeah, and even recommended wording, I think,
Yeah.
so that we stay consistent in how things are worded.
How much of this can be fixed with waiver? I mean, some of these minor, kind of oddball things you recited, be nice if somebody could just say, hey, wait a minute, get as close as you can with the goals that are in the, and let it go, because it isn't gonna have a huge impact on city development.
Who would review that waiver, though?
It's gonna have to go to the Development Review Board, but the question is still gonna come back to be, you know, they're gonna need a certain amount of guidance to know
Mhm.
what should be approved and what shouldn't be approved, so.
Well, that goes back to
We
the
need to be
goals.
specific, yeah, we need to have a certain amount of specificity so they know this is where it's okay for us to say
Well, the
we'll give you
waiver
a
idea
waiver.
makes most sense to me, because I can't imagine a regulation that foresees all these little gotchas.
Yeah.
that come up.
Yeah.
So would you offer us some suggested language?
Yeah, certain of them make a lot of sense, and certain of them I think are gonna be easy, and it'll take us about 5 minutes to go and say, yeah, buried streams.
Yeah.
We can take the buried streams off the map. And in some others, we had, you know, a couple that are just, that I didn't mention, that are just one word changes that say, you know, changes can't have to may have, and it kind of makes certain problems go away that.
Those require a mountain of due process, right, every one of them? And we gotta have a public hearing. and
We'll
continue.
eventually have to compile everything and then warn a public hearing to go through. My hope is that these will be the most important changes that really have to be done to make this workable. As I said, this landscaping issue is a big one. This one kind of stops just about every commercial project in the city that's on a pre-existing lot, because we don't have an out for a property that doesn't meet the
But
rules.
we'd have to have a public hearing, and the city council will have to have two.
Yes.
So this is a laborious process.
It'll take some time to get through, but I'm hoping it's not as much time of our time. I think we can get through a lot of these. You know, we'll be back. We've got another proposal. I'm hoping it'll be short. The cottage clusters is another one that we found as a mistake, because it's allowed in residential 9,000 and it's allowed in rural. It's not allowed in residential 24. And we've got somebody who wants to put one in residential 24, so they're stuck that they can't. So we're like, all right, we think that's just an oversight. It's a pretty easy process for us to have a conversation and say, yeah, it's allowed here, it's allowed here. Certainly it's gonna be allowed in the district in between. But yeah, once we make that decision, it still takes us 3 months, 4 months to actually
At least.
adopt and make that change happen, but.
It's just part of.
We thought no one would ever use the words of the cottage
I
cluster.
know, I know, imagine that,
Well,
right away.
Well, the
No one
biggest,
can yet.
there's still rules, yeah, they still have issues with the rules themselves, but at
Right.
least they're, you know.
So you're saying that we could make these changes, you could do your matrices, we go through it and make these proposed changes.
Yeah, we would bundle them as a package and go through the
present them.
process and, yeah.
But
But-
could you use them before that time?
Probably not. I mean, once it gets warned by the city council, they're basically effective, but I think if we got in a real bind, we could go to this city council under an interim zoning change and they could do it, they could short circuit it and go a little bit faster. But I think,
It's just the nature of.
I think it's just,
things
yeah,
work.
it's a little bit of a
Can't
slow
be perfect.
process, and so we aren't looking to make this a really big thing, cause we know how, once these things get open, they just take on a life of their own. And so we really wanna take it in a bite. If we have to do another one of these in September or October to take another bite of small zoning fixes, I would rather do that than to try to go into one big one that ends up with the dynamics that we had last year.
Yeah.
So, a couple of
Keep
quick
'em
fixes.
discreet, if we can.
Yep, so signs may end up actually waiting, cause signs is probably, is a more, is a bigger discussion. But we'll try to keep it as, I'll come up with some recommendations.
Thank you.
So that's
The
it. for
examples
those.
are helpful too.
What's that?
The examples are helpful too, what the sticking points are.
Oh,
with
yes.
the recommendations.
Yeah, we'll,
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna put some matrices.
yes, the
Okay.
matrices, but
So
the examples are
item-
easy, 'cause that's how we found out.
Item 7 is to consider
I
the.
move approval of the minutes.
The minutes, yeah. Okay, Kim moves, do I have a second?
Second.
John, any discussion? Barb, you were here last time, right?
Yes, it was, yeah. Just missed that one.
I know. Okay. All right, all those in favor of adoption of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, minutes are approved.
We got a new minute taker?
No,
Nope,
Tammy.
the same, still Tam. I made some edits, cause she had some questions on stuff, but,
This seems like more text tonight.
Yeah.
yeah, it was a
The
little more
last one?
text.
Yeah.
We kinda, as she was saying, we kinda got running around, and so I took a look at some things. I did wanna just, before we forget, mention that anyone's welcome to grab the card. April 4th, Historic Preservation Commission is having a bigger meeting. It'll be one of Sarah's last meetings, unless she stays on to finish this project, which she might. We haven't figured that out. We have to see who the new person is.
That's a regular city council meeting, or is it just
Nope.
a show and tell here?
This is, it's actually not, it is on Wednesday, but it's not a council meeting.
Right. Okay.
So it's
That's
a
next.
public,
It's a public meeting for historic preservation. They're gonna talk about updating the city design review regulations, learn about the city design control districts, the importance of historic preservation, share your thoughts and stories. So they are looking for input, especially from people who live in downtown, but anybody who's got an interest in historic preservation or character of the neighborhood.
how are they getting this out, this information? Are they publicizing it?
She's been doing a lot. They actually sent an actual card to every person who lives in the,
Districts, probably.
I'm trying to remember if
Can I
it's
take
the
one?
design control district. I brought extra cards. You're welcome to take one.
Great, I'll take
Um,
one.
I'm trying to remember who got sent, whether it was just the design control district or if it was the historic
saw it.
district, but they sent it out to everybody
That's great.
to try to make sure everybody understands this is going to go on. Now, the district may
Yeah.
be proposed to get bigger. The district, the design control district they're referring to, not the
Mhm.
National
National
Register
Register
District. We're talking about the design review district, the part that goes into zoning. And whether, do we keep this district the same? Do we make it bigger? Do we make it smaller? What types of things should we be looking at regulating? And I think what historic preservation wants to do is to take an opportunity to talk to the public and talk to people about why this is important.
That's good.
Why is historic preservation important? What makes Montpelier unique is not just its people, but its buildings.
Okay, so that's on April
your goal.
4th,
Uh-huh.
April
That's
4th,
next week.
6:30 PM.
In this room.
In this very room.
Okay.
And that being said, I have a motion for adjournment.
I could make that motion.
Thanks, Ken. Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Okay,
No one opposed.
we are adjourned.